Hello everyone, welcome back. Over the weekend I read an article written by Craft Holsters and I thought it was really interesting and I wanted to talk a little bit about it, share it with you guys. Basically I'm on their customer mailing list and they sent out an email with a link to this article that they wrote called Popular Gun Problems. Okay, so these are popular guns and the problems that have been reported with those guns. Okay. So the first one that they talked about was the Glock 43X. Okay, now the Glock 43X is a little bit bigger than the Glock 43. Glock 43 is pretty much my everyday carry gun. And the first problem that they talked about with the 43X is that it's too big. And on that, I agree. I mean, that's a gun that I have shot on a number of times. I have trained people on that gun. I don't own the gun. And the reason why I don't own the gun is because I think that it is a little bit too big. Okay. Now, I don't know, 5'10", about 230. I have, I guess, normal size hands. I have run into a couple of people that have very large hands where the Glock 43 doesn't fit their hands very well. And for those people, the 43X is a better choice. The other thing I have seen is for a lot of women, okay, even with factory Glock 43s, because the gun is so small and light, they have a harder time controlling the Glock 43. However, they are able to control the Glock 43X better. Okay, so in some cases, the gun being slightly bigger might be better for some people. For me, it's not, because you know, as a person that carries every day, when I sit down in the car seat, I want a gun that's not going to hit the car seat, either below me or behind me. And that's why, you know, I carry the Glock 43. I don't even carry it with the extended magazine, right? Because here I got an extended magazine. You see how that hangs out a little bit? It has that little pinky extension. Well, when I tried carrying it with that little pinky extension, I could actually feel the difference. Okay, so I don't carry it with a pinky extension. I carry it with a flush 6-round magazine and then one in the chamber. Okay, so with regards to this, you know, I agree with them. The Glock 43X, for my purposes, is a little bit too big. Okay, they talked about the trigger reset having problems. Okay, now on the 43s that I have built, right, and I'm talking about 43s. I'm not talking about 43Xs. However, a lot of the parts are pretty much the same. On some of the builds that I have done, I did have some trigger reset problems. However, I'm dealing with a lot of aftermarket parts, so I kind of chalked it up to that. However, the fact that Craft Holsters is reporting that factory Glock 43Xs you know, are known to also have occasional trigger problems, now makes me think that, hey, maybe it's not just the fact that, you know, I have an aftermarket frame. Okay, so that's another thing that I learned from this article over here. They said that there were ejection problems. Okay, now this isn't like a continual thing, because obviously, I mean, Glock wouldn't be, you know, wouldn't have been selling these guns if this was like a problem that was happening all the time. This is probably a, you know, a low frequency. These problems are probably very low frequency. Okay, so in all the Glock 43Xs that I have shot, that I have seen shot, I have not noticed an ejection problem. However, it's out there. So it's up for you guys just to be aware of. I have not experienced it, with the exception of where people are limp wristing the gun. Okay, so that's a really important thing with these lighter guns, with the smaller guns. If you're not holding the gun firmly so that the bottom of the gun is steady while the top is running back and forth, the gun can jam. So in order for the gun, for a semi-automatic firearm to work, the bottom has to stay steady so that it conserves the energy, and all that recoil energy goes into the slide to cycle the gun. If you hold the gun loosely and the whole gun moves, it's going to bleed off energy. The slide's not going to come back all the way, and it's either going to either fail to eject or fail to feed. That is the most common reason that I see people having you know, ejection problems and feeding problems on factory guns. They're not holding the gun tight enough, and it's moving around. You know, a lot of times with especially with these small guns, when people are shooting, their hands will separate. You know, well, if the hands separate, the gun moves that slide is probably not going to come back all the way. You're probably going to have a jamming problem. Okay, so that's common with small guns. I've seen it happen more times with the smaller 43s than I have seen it happen with the 43Xs. You know, on the larger 17s and 19s, I hardly ever see it happen just because the gun is heavier. It has more mass. You know, so that the gun moves around less. So as the gun gets smaller, if you're not holding it tighter, there's an increasing chance that you're going to have ejection and feeding problems. Okay, so I think that might be the reason for this ejection problem that's being reported here. Other thing that they talked about was the trigger lottery. Okay, what they're saying here is that with Glocks, there can be a variance from one trigger to the next, right? So if you have like 10 factory Glocks, right, all 43Xs or all 43s or all 17s or 19s, sometimes the trigger can be a little different from one to the other. For me, that's been less of an issue. You know, I just get used to whatever I have. But I have noticed that a little bit from one Glock to another. There can be a little bit of a difference in the way the trigger feels. Okay, that's really not that big of an issue to me, but it can be an issue for people. Okay? So, moving on, the next gun that they talked about was the Springfield Hellcat. Don't own it, never even shot it. So I'm basically accepting what they have to say on this. They said that there were some reported reliability issues. Okay. Now I have a Springfield XD. I've never noticed any problems with that. So, and again, this is probably a very low probability thing because otherwise, Springfield would have, I think, addressed this issue. But apparently it's out there. Other thing that they talked about, price. Okay, the Springfields tend to be a little bit more expensive. So, for example, the Springfield XD that I have, very similar to, let's say, the Glock 19, right? And it tends to be somewhere between $100 and $200 more expensive for essentially the same gun, right? All of these striker-fired guns, more or less, are based on the Glock design, right? The patent on the Gen 3 Glocks expired, and after that, a lot of the other companies started copying it. So, with the Springfield Hellcat, you're paying more money for your basic striker-fired gun. Okay, so that's the other thing that they brought up. The other thing they brought up, apparently there was some trigger issues. I can't offer any information on that. I mean, I just don't have any experience with the Hellcats, but just something to be aware of. If you're buying a Hellcat, look at a lot of reviews, see how common this issue is. Again, don't look at this list of problems as absolute. Look at this more as, okay, this is something I want to do a little bit more research on before I buy this gun. Okay. Other thing that they mentioned with the Springfield Hellcat is holster options. Okay. With the more common guns, right, like the Glocks, okay, you've got more holster options. The Springfield Hellcat, I mean, it is a common gun, but it's not as common as let's say your Glock 19, your SIG 320. So you're gonna have less holster options out there. Okay, so that's one of the things you want to consider if you're buying one of these Hellcats. Okay, now next thing that they talked about was the Taurus Judge. Okay, now I got a Taurus Raging Judge Magnum here. Okay, now this gun is a lot bigger than the one that they were talking about there. I think they were just talking about one of the regular ones. However, I have shot other Taurus Judge guns, and also I have a good deal of experience with this. First of all, let's talk about their issues, and then I'll tell you guys about my experience with Taurus revolvers in general. They mentioned a timing issue. Basically, there's a bunch of gears in here, right, over here, and as you press the trigger, basically that action of pressing the trigger pulls back the hammer and rotates the cylinder. Okay, so pressing the trigger does two things at once, and then as you're pressing the hammer, basically there's this, there's a little lever that comes up and engages these gears over here and turns it. And basically that has each of these chambers has to line up with both the hammer and with the barrel. Okay, and if it doesn't line up properly, your the hammer, or I mean, there's a firing pin in there, I believe, but basically the primer is not going to get ignited, or if it does get ignited and your chamber is not properly aligned, you can have the bullet, not go into the center of the barrel. It can go off center. And I have seen a couple of pictures of these big revolvers with the front half just like completely blown off because the bullet went into the side of the barrel, basically. And I can tell with this one right here, there is a little bit of play on the cylinder. Most revolvers have a little bit of play, and this one does have a double latch, right? It's got, to open up the cylinder, you got to push forward here and pull down here in order to open this up. So it does lock on both ends, but that's a potential issue, timing. Okay, now this timing issue, right, is a general problem with revolvers. A lot of people think that revolvers never break, they're 100% reliable. Nothing could be further from the truth. The people that say revolvers are 100% reliable have usually never shot more than 500 rounds on the revolver. Okay, there's a reason why the military got away from revolvers as fast as they possibly could. Okay, first issue is this. First of all, there's a lot more moving parts. There's gears that have to line up properly and engage, and everything's exposed. Okay, so if you drop this in the dirt or the sand, and sand and dirt gets in there, right? This is open, the guts are open. So if you drop this, if you cover this with sand, sand's going to get in there. It's going to prevent this from rotating properly, and I have seen that a couple of times. Whereas with a gun like this, okay, as long as the slide is closed, there's really no way that anything can get in there, right? Only when the slide's open can stuff get in there. Okay, one of the things I caution people about with these aftermarket slides, you see how I have these really cool cuts here because it looks so great. Well, basically that's a point of weakness in terms of, dirt and sand can get in there, and if this, basically this gun, if it goes into the sand or dirt, that can cause it to jam up. Okay, so as far as like guns that would be going into that type of environment, you don't want these cool looking cuts on the gun. You want the slide to be solid with no openings on it. Okay, so that's one of the issues with these revolvers. The fact that there's timing issues. Everything has the gears, the levers, everything has to match up properly and rotate properly so that the gun can work. A lot of things can go wrong. Okay, they talked about the fact that the Judge is oversized. Now, obviously, this is a very oversized gun. I think it weighs something like 4.5 pounds. But the Judge, even the smaller Judges, they're pretty big. Okay, they're big, they're heavy, they're a little awkward to carry. But the fact that these cylinders are larger to accommodate the shotgun shells means that as I press the trigger, there's a bigger piece of metal that's turning. Okay, and so there's a lot more power that's involved in rotating that larger cylinder. And as the gun gets dirtier and dirtier, and which will happen with revolvers because there's a barrel cylinder gap here, so a lot of the gases are coming out through this hole here and they end up back here, and these guns do get dirty, and especially with I don't see it so much with the small revolvers, but with these large ones, if I do a lot of shooting with them, I actually have to use these flutes here to manually rotate the cylinder, right, as the gun gets really dirty, right? So sometimes I gotta help it along because it becomes in fact, sometimes I gotta use my thumb too. So use my, rather than try and pull this, if the gun gets very dirty, I have to cock it and rotate it. Okay, so that's one of the issues with these big heavy revolvers with these gigantic cylinders. As the gun gets dirty, the rate at which the difficulty, basically there's an increasing difficulty with pulling the trigger, rotating the cylinder. Okay, so the next thing, firing problem. Again, everything has to be lined up correctly. The cylinder has to properly rotate in order for you to be able to fire the gun. And again, if it gets dirty and you're not, keep going the wrong way. If it gets dirty and you can't properly rotate the cylinder, you know, basically the gun's not going to work. Okay, so you can have firing problems with these big revolvers. Holster problems. Obviously, it's extremely hard to find a holster for this gun. I've made a holster for this, right? It's not hard to make it, but there's not too many options out there as far as holsters for a gun like this or similar guns like this. Okay, I mean they are out there, right? But you know, it's not like a Glock where you just go like Amazon and you've got like you just you basically do a search on holster, Glock, Glock 17 or Glock 19, and you get like hundreds of options that pop up. That's not going to happen with these big revolvers. Okay. Now let me say something else with regards to Taurus revolvers. Um, with the exception of this one, and that's only because I haven't shot more than 2,000 rounds with this. With the exception of this one, every Taurus revolver that I have owned has gone back to Taurus for repair. Okay, a few of them they completely replaced the gun, right? Because they either couldn't, they couldn't find the parts, or there was damage to the frame, right? So on a few of them, or basically it was an older model that they no longer had parts for. But with the exception of this one, every Taurus revolver that I have owned has gone back for repair, and that includes 22s, right? Because with 22s, a lot of times you'll do a lot more shooting with that, right? You buy 500 round bricks, so it's really easy to get up over, over 2,000 rounds. And I don't remember I don't remember if it was 2,000 rounds or 4,000 rounds or whatever, 6,000 rounds. But every Taurus revolver, and I've had 22s, I've had 38s, I've had 357s, they've all had to go back to Taurus for repair. Okay, so keep that in mind with Taurus guns. Okay, if you do a lot of shooting on these, and I don't do a lot of shooting with this one, but if you do a lot of shooting, they will break. Okay. Now next, let's talk about the SIG 365 that was on their list. This one is particularly interesting to me because that's probably the only gun that I'm kind of like in the market for. I'm considering buying a SIG 365. Has to be optic ready. It's really the only gun I think I'm interested in buying at this point, just because I've built so many of these things. I got like tons of these guns. But the thing that interests me about the SIG 365 is the gun is the same size as this Glock 43, but this one holds 6 + 1, 7 rounds. That one holds 10 + 1. Okay, so the way they did it is these Glock magazines, they have an inner steel case, and then they have a plastic outer shell. Well, what they did is they got rid of the double body, right, and they just have a steel outer case, which created more space on the inside of the magazine, and that's how they were able to fit extra rounds in there. And I think that was an ingenious idea, and that's the reason why I am considering. However, I am going to be testing out a new magazine that's coming out for the Glock 43. It's called the Z9 from Shield Arms, and that's supposed to basically they're kind of copying that same idea. So I'm going to be doing a review on that soon. But that, as I was saying, of all these guns here, the SIG 365 is the one I am considering buying. If I see it at a good price at some point, I will get it. It has to be optic ready. Do not buy any guns unless they're optic ready. Any guns that are not optic ready are, as far as I'm concerned, are already antiques, and they will definitely be relegated to antiques or junk within the next 10 years. If you don't believe me, consider AR-15s, right? Pretty much every AR-15 that is sold today is optic ready. It has a Picatinny rail on it. About 10, 15 years ago, that had not been decided yet, so they were still selling ARs that had fixed carrying handles. So where are all those ARs today, right? They're all in the back of the safe, nobody ever shoots those anymore, okay? So they're either antique or junk, depending on your point of view. So that was, 10, 15 years ago with the AR-15s. That's where these pistols are. Like this one over here, this does not have a cut for an optic. So, within 10 years, I think that this is going to go the same way as the AR-15. If it's not going to take an optic, it's either antique or junk, depending on your point of view. Okay, so, SIG 365. First problem they mentioned was the sights. Okay, The first SIG 365 that I shot had this Mi-Pro Lite aiming system on it, which initially I thought was interesting. I did buy that sighting system separately to try out on my guns. After some trial, after a bunch of trials, I decided I did not like it. Don't recommend it. So don't get that. The iron sights that come with it, craft holsters in this article said that they did not like it. As far as if I buy a SIG 365, it's gonna be optic ready. I'm buying it for the purpose of putting a house on 507K or the next model, if that's the next generation, if that's available. So it's gonna take an optic, so the sights are less of an issue for me. But just be aware of that if you're planning to shoot it just with iron sights. Extraction. They said that the SIG 365 it's been reported to have extraction problems. I suspect same thing as the G43X over here. Those extraction problems are most likely due to people not holding the gun firmly enough, and when they shoot the gun moves around, and the slide doesn't come back all the way to fully eject and then pick up the next round. Okay, so that's the reason why I think they're having extraction problems, because otherwise I think that SIG would have addressed it. Okay? And I've seen it enough times. I mean, like, I've seen people jam up the gun. I pick it up, bang, 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 bang. Gun's working fine. They shoot the gun. They're jamming it right up. Definitely user error. Okay. So that's the extraction issue. Just be aware of it. Other issue that they mentioned with the SIG 365, out of battery, and that's basically when you're shooting the gun does not fully go into battery, right? It's kind of sits still like this. Again, that's also, I've seen that happen, not so much with SIG 365s, but in general, lots of these small semi-automatic. Again, completely related to the fact that people holding the gun loose, and the slide, basically the slide is not snapping forward the way it's supposed to snap forward. They're bleeding off the energy. That usually the telltale indicators is when there's people are shooting it, their hands are separating, right? So it'll be like bang, bang, bang. That's the first indicator that I'll see. The second indicator, where maybe they're not that bad, right? Let's say they're still holding on to the gun, but they're still having either feeding or out of battery problems. What I will notice is that the cases are ejecting erratically. So when you're shooting, right? If I'm standing over here and I'm shooting, all my cases should be coming out in a rainbow pattern and landing pretty much in the same spot. I should be able to put a cup there and catch them all. Okay. So if they're shooting and the cases are going one here, one there, that's an inconsistent grip, okay? Or sometimes I'll see people shooting and the cases are all coming over on this side or hitting him in the face, all right? If the cases are hitting you in the face, it's because your grip is weak, gun is lifting up, opening up, and shooting it right in your face. So again, that is a user error problem. Grip's not strong enough, and that's why you're probably having extraction problems. Yet you're having these out of battery problems, because that slide needs to slap forward, right? It needs to go forward with force. And if you're not holding the gun firmly, it may not do that. Okay, now it's less prone. I have seen it happen with the larger guns, but it's less prone to happening. The reason is because the larger gun has more mass. So its weight picks up more, the recoil. This gun moves around a lot less compared to the smaller, lighter gun like this G43 or the SIG 365. Okay, so gripping the gun, holding it firm, especially a small gun, is everything. The gun's not going to work properly unless you're properly holding it. And the true test is you should see all your cases coming out in the rainbow pattern, pretty much landing in the same spot, and that's how you know you got a nice firm grip. Okay. Other issue mentioned, problem with the SIG 365 is the rounds getting jammed in the 12-round magazine. So it has a 10-round flush magazine, right? So the flush magazine like this one over here, or if you get an extended one like the one I have here, right? See how this extends down, right? You got that little the pinky grip over here. Well, that also gives you space for 2 extra rounds. So it's being reported that the 12-round magazines are causing problems. The reason why I think that they're having people having problems with the 12-round magazines is because, first of all, when you grip this, first of all, see how I grip it? You see how the magazine moves? So by putting your finger on the magazine and using that to to hold it on the recoil, that magazine is going to move. So I suspect that's the reason why they're having problems with the 12-round magazines, but not with the 10-round flush magazines. Because when I hold this, see how my hands wrap around it? It's really not putting that much stress on the magazine. So that's the problem with the extended magazines. I've seen this issue with a lot of guns, even rifles, where sometimes people will try to hold the magazine on a rifle, and that will cause jamming problems. Okay, so I mean, you're not going to have that on a problem on an AR or an AK, but some of the other cheaper guns, if you're holding the magazine or if the magazine's touching the ground, you'll have feeding problems like that. So, so I can completely understand how the extended magazine with the pinky extension is going to cause problems on the SIG 365. Other problem that's being mentioned here is what they call striker drag, because Craft Holster is going to see this video because they're one of my followers, and I would like them to expand more on that. What I think they're talking about, same issue I have had with the Glock 43s. Okay, so with these Glock 43s, when I pull the trigger, lock it open, right? Well, it didn't happen that time. Let's try it again. Pull the trigger, lock it open. There you go. So sometimes you see how the firing pin hangs forward. Where are you? Oh, there it is. Get the angle there. There it is. Now you can see it. Now you see how the firing pin is hanging forward. All right. So sometimes that firing pin hangs forward, and what happens is it's hanging forward as the case comes up. It hits it on the way up, and that will cause a jam. Or a lot of times you'll hit it. It'll push the pin back. And what it will do is it stresses the pin head out, and the pin head will break. All of the aftermarket firing pins that I got for these Glock 43s, I have broken all of them. Okay, because of that firing pin that hangs forward. The ones I have in here now are from Aim Surplus. They're billet strikers. They've been working pretty good. No jams. No firing pin heads breaking. But the problem with this Glock 43, the way it differs from, let's say, the Glock 17, 19, 26 is these guns, the firing pin head has an arrowhead design. So as the case comes up, it pushes the firing pin back if it's still hanging forward. Okay, that's because it's an arrowhead design like that. Well, the firing pin head on the 43 and I'm pretty sure the 43X and I'm pretty sure the SIG 365 is more of a nipple design. I mean, there is a little bit of a slant underneath it, but nothing like the arrowhead design that the larger guns have, that you just mentioned. So what's happening is because it doesn't have that arrowhead design, it has more of a nipple design. The case comes up and it hits the bottom of the firing pin head. So I think that is what they're talking about when they say striker drag. Okay, the firing pin hangs forward, the case comes up, hits the bottom of it, and it's going to cause jams, and it's going to break the firing pin head. And you're going to see this problem more with the aftermarket stuff versus the OEM stuff. However, I think that the design flaw is kind of there. It should have been an arrowhead design. So if you do this enough times, if you don't have a strong enough grip with certain type of ammunition, whatever, lots of different variables, I think that in some cases this problem is going to manifest itself where that firing pin is hanging forward, and as the case comes up, hits the bottom of it, and either jams up trying to feed, or it snaps the after enough times hitting it, it eventually breaks the firing pin head off. I've done videos where I actually show how that firing pin head is actually broken. Okay, so I want to thank Craft Holsters for doing this article. I think it was really good. In some cases, it kind of confirmed some things that I had been experiencing. All right. In other cases, it brought attention to some things that I didn't know about. Like with the Hellcat, because I just I don't know. I don't own that gun. Never shot that gun. And in some cases, like the SIG 365, where I'm interested in buying this gun, I know now there's a couple of things that I want to look out for. Particularly, I was not aware that they were having striker drag issues, and if I'm sure Craft Holster is going to see this video, because I'm going to send them a link. When they see this, I would like them in the comment section to expand a little bit more on the striker drag and their experience. Now let me just talk real quick about Craft Holsters. They don't pay me or anything. I do have a number of their products. I've done reviews on their stuff in the past. This is my favorite holster from Craft Holsters. This is my nicest holster. Okay, it is a shoulder holster. I have the what is this? SIG 2022 over here. It's got 2 extra magazines over here. Really nice holster. The way I use this holster is, because here's the thing, I still have my gun here. So for a situation, like let's say you got riots in town and for whatever reason you need to go out, I mean, you're not going into the riot area, but you need to go out and get some supplies or whatever. Let's say you gotta go buy a baby formula, right? So you're not going into the riot area, you're going one town over. And what happens is, okay, you don't want to, you would like to take your AR-15, right, along with you, because that's the best gun. But you can't, because if you go into the store with an AR on your back, the guy behind the counter might get freaked out and run out. So since I can't go in with an AR, what's the next best thing? Well, I don't want to go in with just this little thing over here, right? Right. So what I can do is I can strap this on, right? So now I got a full-size gun that holds 15 rounds here, 2 extra magazines, 15 rounds each. All right. And now, in that type of a situation, this is now being, normally my AR is my primary gun, and this is the backup gun, okay? And this is the everyday carry gun. Well, now this is going to be the primary gun, and this here becomes the backup gun. So this is a really good way to use a shoulder holster, in that type of a scenario. So let me know what you guys think of this stuff. If you guys have any additional information you'd like to contribute, put it in the comments section. If you're not a member of the channel, subscribe. I'll talk to you all soon. Make sure you also follow me on Odyssey, which is an uncensored platform. Odyssey is spelled ODYSEE.com. And my channel name over there is Pocono Tactical. I'll talk to you all soon.